because I flew in there to do shoot a commercial and was just blown away by the scenery. And then, to my amazement, only a few years ago when I was looking into my father's background, my dad was with the Air Force. And in fact, you know, I wasn't born until he was about 45. And I knew a little bit about him because he'd gone to the First World War with the 7th Light Horse and fought off the back of a horse in Palestine for a while. And then, because he was quite a short man, he was seconded into the 1st Fighter Squadron. So he spent the second part of the First World War fighting in the air. And then in between wars, he was a planter in New Guinea and a private aviator and all the rest of it. But an aunt sent me, Dad died in the 70s, but an aunt sent me a whole bunch of stuff only a few years ago. And to my amazement, I found that he'd been born in Wellington. So I'm half New Zealand, and I'm very pleased about that. And I followed up the story about why. And my grandfather, his father, had been a buyer of textiles. So he would sail around the world with his family, with his wife and 10 children. My father had 7 sisters and 2 brothers. And they'd pull him to places like Bombay, and they'd stay a couple of months and he'd buy up silk and things like that. And then come to Australia and then to New Zealand to buy wool, which eventually, of course, was all packed up and sent back to the mills in England. So that's why he was born while they were here in New Zealand. As far as Star Wars is concerned, the story of my involvement was I'd been travelling with my wife and my 2 daughters, who were quite small at that time, through places like Indonesia and Bali, and we were staying and sort of bumming around and enjoying travelling. And we ended up in London for a few months, and I had an agent in London. And one day she rang and she said, Peter, look, there's this strange little science fiction movie being shot out at Pinewood. She said there's a completely unknown director called George Lucas. We don't know whether he's much good or not. But she said there's a couple of days work in it if you like it. And I said, oh, how much? Because we were broke, as usual. And she said, £60 a day. I said, I'll take it. I had no idea what the part was or anything like that. I just needed the money. So I found myself out at Pinewood and involved in this extraordinary film. At the time, we didn't know it was extraordinary. And I remember, because the scene I did was set in that control room. And I remember standing at the back. It was just a small studio, that part of it was, against black curtains at the back, and watching the technicians light the scene and the camera guys fixing up the cameras and doing all that sort of thing. And then I suddenly became aware of this guy that had come and stood beside me. And I looked at him and I thought, oh, he must be the accountant, because he had these battered old grey trousers on, a sort of dirty white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his glasses were sort of cocked to one side, and his hair was all over the place. And we got talking, and he asked me where I was from, and I said, I'm from Australia, and that, got us talking. We talked about a few things. And then, after about 5 minutes, the first assistant director sort of did this to him, and he said, oh, excuse me, and away he went. And then about 10 minutes later, I was introduced to him, and it was George Lucas. And because I had to be officially introduced, that's what happens. And we went ahead and did the scene. And it was, I just loved working because the guys that we were working with were obviously, they were skilled English technicians. And they really knew what they were doing. And I was pleased to be doing what I began to realise was a good film. Because the work I'd done in Australia before, I'd done a series called Spy Force, and over 2 years we'd shot 40 one-hour episodes. That's like making about 13 movies. So I knew what I was doing, and so I could relax and enjoy it. And it went very smoothly. The only part that didn't go very smoothly was when we came to the scene where I get to the airlock door and press the button and the door goes up, it actually went up very slowly because of the way things were. And in the film, of course, they speeded it up. And there was R2-D2 and the Wookiee. And on the first take, and the Wookiee was radio controlled. Of course, there was somebody, you know, it was not the Wookiee, R2-D2. Of course, C-3PO had a person inside, and so did the Wookiee. But R2-D2 was radio controlled. So the first take, the door went up, and R2-D2 spun round and shot back down the corridor. So, okay, set it all up again, bring the door down, take two. So the door went up, R2-D2 shot straight in and hit me, and fell over. So, okay, set it all up again. So up with, and then the third take, the door went up, and this time R2-D2 shot past me and hit the camera. Because they really, you know, they were still experimenting. This was the first movie that was ever made, and they were still experimenting, and they had no idea, you know, what would work and what didn't. And it took us about 10 takes before they got R2-D2 to do exactly what was required, and then the Wookiee knocked me, bang, and I went onto a mattress, and that was the end of me. And I've always been happy that I wasn't actually shot or killed, because I thought, well, maybe I can come back. And I've even thought of asking my agent to call the casting people at Disney and say, Peter wants another role, but, you know, who knows. And it was quite extraordinary. In the breaks, I'd wander around the rest of the studio, and there was a massive main studio in which that spacecraft was that belonged to Harrison Ford. And there it was, and there was the white guard that when I wave, he waves back and does all that. But I went down during the break, and I was amazed at the construction of this thing, just extraordinary. And I also, there was in the middle of the floor, God, lights, camera, action, in the middle of the floor, there was a sort of, it looked like a circular paling fence. And I can't remember if it appears in the film or not, or what function it had. But I strolled over, you know, during the tea break with my uniform on, and I thought, what is this? And I looked down and I went, oh God. I was looking down about 3 kilometres. It was like, you know, the machinery of the starship or something was going down, 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 down. And then I thought, wait a minute, that's painted on the floor. And of course it was, and I looked very careful. I thought, my God. Because you see, in those days, it was the end of the period when all of those sort of special effects were hand done. And some of those old Cockney guys who'd been with the studios for 100 years, you know, oh, all right, darling, you know, you want a backdrop with a castle, I'll paint it for you, you know. So they've been employed. These amazing men, they're all gone now, because you see, it's all done by special effects now. It's all computer-generated images. But then, for things like that, these guys got down on their knees and laboriously painted it. And it looked spectacular. But of course, those days are all gone now. And I was sad to see that, because some of those old codgers. I remember doing a film called Ned Kelly in 1969 in Australia, and the one that Mick Jagger played, Ned Kelly. God, oh dear. But they had to build right out near Canberra, they had to build a hotel where the big shootout was, where the police tracked the Kelly gang. So they built it, you know, as an old, you know, 80s type hotel, wooden, and they put in the bar and they put the glass and the shelves and all the rest of it. And then one day, these two lovely old Cockneys turned up, same sort of guys from the same studios, you know, hello darling, you know, lovely to see you, yeah, all right. And I said to them, because I was on the set and watching the work going on, we weren't filming, they were filming somewhere else, I had a day off. And I said, what do you go? Because they just turned up, and they said, oh, we like this country, this is lovely, you know, all right. And their whole job, their only job, was to age the set. They'd been flown out from London, and that was their job. So they got to work with dirt and with scratchy paint, and they'd scratch things and they'd rub things, till the whole set, which, you know, when they built it out of new wood and everything, looked new. By the time they'd finished after a couple of days, you could have sworn that hotel had been there for 50 years, because it was dust and cobwebs and mess and all the rest of it. But that's a sort of, and all that, I'm afraid, is gone now. It's all gone because it's all done now, everything like that with computer generated images. So that was my experience with Star Wars. I laughed because I got £120 for it. People have said to me at times, "Oh, you must be so rich with all the years of royalties." No. I was too small an actor, too small a part ever to get royalties. And I think I spent about 100 times what I earned on postage for people who, for 40 years, have been sending me photographs and things from around the world and saying, "Would you sign this and send it back to me?" And I've done it. And I must say, you know, I've made a point of always doing that because early on I got a letter from a guy, and he was obviously, you know, maybe 30s, 40, and he said in the letter, "I've been ill," and the old term would have been iron lung, one of those dreadful machines that people, you know, because they have some sort of lung problem, they spend their lives lying in this wretched machine with a mirror there. I can't imagine it. But his whole life had become Star Wars. And that's when I thought, I've got to answer that. And I did. And made a point thereafter, every single letter that ever came to me over the years, I would respond to, because I thought to myself, you know, there are so many people out there who maybe